All right, everybody. Welcome to the NextUp Soccer Summit. We're excited to have you here. My name is Jeremy Goldberg. I'm the president quarterback at LeagueApps. And we're excited to welcome here along with our partner, soccer.com in this event. I'm also joined by my colleague who will be joining us momentarily. There she is. Benita Fitzgerald Mosley. She's the president of Fundplay, head of our community and impact. She's also an Olympic gold medalist, which definitely beats my 7th grade quarterback title. I'm not even good enough at soccer to have a requisite title there. But we're excited for all of you to be here for this first ever NextUp event exclusively for soccer leaders.
That's right, Jeremy. Welcome everybody to our soccer summit at LeagueApps. Many of you know we're more than just a technology company. And while we do provide the operating system with registration and payment collection and communication tools for youth and local sports leaders, we're also building a community of youth sports professionals that can work together, learn from each other, and also from leaders in sports and beyond the sports field as well. We ultimately aim to make youth sports better, and we want to see all kids from all communities have higher quality experiences and access to sports. We have a Fundplay program that specifically provides our technology for free to sports-based youth development organizations and other capacity building experiences for these organizations and also the kids that they serve from under-resourced communities. So this NextUp Soccer Summit is really important to us as a company here at LeagueApps, and we're thrilled to have a host of incredible leaders on panels and also in the audience that really believe that soccer has a role to play in enriching kids' lives. I'm really looking forward to providing all of you with some insights and best practices on leadership development and marketing, and also developing a winning staff and team. And through it all, we're going to hear from leaders in the youth soccer space, and we're going to give you, of course, plenty of breaks to meet with other attendees in this really wonderful remote platform. And finally, we know all of us have that little competitive streak in us, and so we're going to have some trivia planned, hosted by our partners at soccer.com, and some raffle giveaways later today. So, Jeremy, I'm really curious to know what you're looking forward to taking away from the Soccer Summit today.
Yeah, you know, one of the things I think why we put this together and have this great lineup is we hope that the soccer community can recognize and respond to the moment and see that moment as part of really a larger movement. Even before COVID, I remember being at the Florida AGM meeting in the fall of 2019 and was giving a talk about the future of soccer, right? That was the talk I was asked to give. And in that time, pre-COVID, I predicted a rapid transformation of youth sports and soccer, far greater than what the past 10 years had held. And that change was really driven by technological innovation, the consolidation of sports organizations, and shifting player and parent expectations. And COVID has accelerated this inevitability. So the data makes this clear. There will be far fewer, and I believe more impactful soccer organizations in this country in the future. And the soccer organizations that thrive will be the ones that are focused on professionalism, technological innovation, diversity and equity and participation and coaching, and youth development, not just athlete development. And here's the other prediction that I have. There may be no more important industry to respond to what is happening in our world than the work that's happening in the world of youth and local sports. And soccer, I think, could really lead the way. You know, this country, and for this matter, our world, is really rife with division. We've lost that sense of community, and it's the kind of community that is built every single day through our sport and on the soccer fields. And what COVID has also reminded us is that sports can mean so much to our society, right? It's not just wins and losses, scholarships and contracts. It's the benefits for life, which is why we have to accept our collective responsibility to ensure all kids have access to the right soccer experiences on and off the field, because those benefits are so profound. So today's keynotes, workshops, networking are going to speak to the immense opportunity that this community has, and will hopefully give you some very practical ideas to realize it. The voices of the grassroots leaders are critical, which is why they're going to be elevated in all the conversations today. And we also recognize that the future of soccer in this country are going to be impacted by a lot of other really important organizations. So they're also represented. The engagement of MLS and their clubs, not to mention US Soccer and their various entities, groups like USCC and all the companies that are involved in the market like soccer.com and LeagueApps, all participating as part of this conversation. And so we want to make sure you take full advantage of this event. We're not on Zoom. We are on a platform called Remo, And right now we're in presentation mode, so you can see and hear our speakers, but your microphone and camera are automatically off. You can actually use the chat function. You click on chat to chat with people at your table or with the entire group that's attending. And you can use the Q&A function to engage with speakers and fellow attendees. So feel free to add that. And then once the session is done, we're going to return to networking mode. So you can jump between different tables, just click on the table, and you could chat with your fellow attendees, because so much of learning and community comes from our interactions with each other. Any questions, you can DM a NextUp staff member through that chat tool, or you can go to the bottom of your screen and click on the info booth table, and they'll help you out. So we hope you're going to take full advantage of the chance to connect with each other and with the great speakers today. And with that, I'm going to be very excited to welcome in Fred Lipka, Vice President, Technical Director, and Player Development at the MLS. And before Fred gets up here, we are going to show a brief video. And one thing that probably needs no introduction for this community is the playing in youth soccer, especially with the advent of MLS Next, which is really set out to provide the best player development experience in North America. And it was founded on this idea of a collaborative approach to governance and a commitment to inclusion, not just about the best athletes in the world, which they want to do, but also to develop people who are prepared for their futures, both in soccer and life. So before we get started, I'm going to throw to a quick video that I think will get us started today and set the right tone. So with that, let's roll the tape.
See you guys later.
Sound right now. So we're going to either we'll play it after the conversation with Fred. I don't want to take up any more time. So we'll work through that technical difficulty, stop the tape. And with that, I'm going to have Fred come in and we'll take two on that video as we wrap with Fred. Turn your camera on and join us. I know we got a lot to talk about, and we're just going to rely on you to pump everybody up, which is not going to be hard. And then we'll go to the video afterwards. So Fred, thanks for being with us and for being part of the conversation.
Thank you, Jeremy, for having me. It's a pleasure to be with you guys.
And one thing I should say is I talked a little bit about your role at MLS, but you have a long history in coaching and leading the sport. You've been overseeing coaching education, youth competitions, and relations with various kinds of domestic and international organizations related to player development at MLS since 2015. So we appreciate the wealth of perspective you'll bring to the conversation. And I want to start with a conversation about the vision you have for youth soccer in the United States. And when I think about soccer, I know many in the soccer world, like myself, were a little bit distressed by the failure to place a team in the Olympics this year. And what it seemed like we'd not been able to get at the hump, over the hump at the most elite levels. But I know you have a very optimistic view of the future of U.S. soccer, not just in terms of the international competitions, but the ability for us to develop great players. So talk a little bit about what your vision is, and MLS's vision for the potential of soccer here and what can happen.
Yes, and we thank you, Jeremy, for giving me the opportunity to talk about the recent, I would say, games from the Canadian and the American team last weekend. We are all disappointed, but as a foreigner, and you know I am French, I'm going to give you some benchmark over the last decades in terms of U23 Olympic of the French team. And you know France with Brazil, Argentina is currently with Spain, for example, are the best country to develop talents for at the highest level. So over the last decades, the last Olympic tournament we participate with the French U23, it was in '96. We haven't participated in the last 5 events of the Olympics for many reasons, but the most important reason was we never play the best player in the Olympic. And it doesn't mean the US team, national team, or the Canadian should have been able to be qualified, but it's a reality of the competitiveness. When you play Honduras, you play a team which is very competitive and also has the habit to win games. So I would say during the same time, we won 2 World Cups. We lost 1 World Cup in final, and we won one Euro as well. So not being able to participate or to do very well in Olympics doesn't mean your country is in a bad shape in terms of soccer-wise speaking. We should have been able to do better, but it's not because of that we are not going to be successful tomorrow. And I think when I also talk to my peers in France or all across in Europe, everyone sees the US and also Canada like a future country which are going to be able to compete at the highest level.
Well, so Fred, when you think about in that vision of optimism, when you think about MLS's engagement, what is the vision and impact that you see can happen in youth soccer? Right? What's the potential that you see? Ultimately, what's the world that you want to see for soccer in this country?
That's a good question. I think what we want to achieve with Next and MLS, but also for all the young kids, boys and girls, but boys firstly because we are first focused on both sides with Next, but it's to give an aspirational pathway, a clear pathway wherever you are, you have a chance to fulfill your dream, to become a pro player, or also to get the college program you would like to commit to. And I think it's very important to us to be, for sure, to see the top of the pyramid, but also that to know that MLS is and Next are going to be useful to live your passion and to achieve your professional objective, your academic objective. And this is also what is important to build soccer and strong leagues, pro leagues, not only MLS, but pro leagues in the country, to give tools for the players to achieve their objective. That I think it's tremendously important. We don't see MLS Next that as only a pro league or an elite league.
When you think, Fred, and I think that ambition, we'll talk about MLS Next in a second. You mentioned France earlier in your context there, and France has this now amazing reputation for the highest levels of success and obviously player development throughout that entire system. When you think about the U.S. and the potential here, can we compete with the French of the world? Are you optimistic about when we have that kind of more inclusive mindset to both player development and people playing soccer, how great of an opportunity exists here for soccer, both in terms of what can happen professionally and on the world stage, but also in terms of the ecosystem as a whole?
I have no doubt that we are going to be able to compete. The question is when. France is currently winning, but we lost a lot, and we were almost mocked in the 80s, 90s for not being able to compete and not being able to develop players. We went through 5 plan of 10 years, and this is why also we were after able to win. And when Aimé Jacquet, 98, won the World Cup, he said this victory is a victory of each educator of the country, not coach. He was talking about educator, and that's the way we call a head coach in our country, educators, because there is a technical piece, the soccer piece, and also everything behind soccer. And if one day, and I hope it will come soon, the US or Canada win the World Cup, it will be the victory not only of MLS, of the national team, or of the federation. It will be the victory of every single educator. It should be, because all the kids come from grassroots and come from amateur, recreational, good level, competitive level, and in the right pathway to finish the job. But I think it's not because of only one parameter is going to work that we are going to achieve our objective.
And the opportunity, when you talk about this potential, it's not just theoretical, right? What MLS is doing with MLS Next is stepping in and saying, we're going to help bring that reality closer to fruition. So maybe give the quick description on MLS Next. I'm told, by the way, that I couldn't hear the video, but many other people could. So we will play the video again, but some people got a glimpse of that. But Fred, what is MLS Next, and why did MLS kind of engage in this initiative?
MLS Next it's a community of clubs. For now, the best club in the country, which believe in standards, which believe in competitiveness, and also in a teaching and learning process. We want to compete to develop the players which will be able to become pro or achieve their full potential at 18, 19, 20, 21. It depends of their capacity to play, and also want also to become the role model. We need also to elevate the level in both countries, and we have also good record over the last few months. We have doubled the amount of minute play in MLS with our homegrown player. When in the same time we are also increase the amount of money in buying player from abroad. So both are possible, both are compatible, and we also now have very good, I would say, image and track record in terms of transferring player in Europe, and the player now we sold abroad, or which decided to go abroad, are doing very well at the highest level. So it's a kind of how this with Next and our clubs, which are MLS or not, we are going to design the I would say the pro game of tomorrow, and how we are going to be aspirational, not only in looking what happens abroad, but how to be proud of what happens in Canada and the US. For sure, we are more focused on the US because we are more club, but I think it's how to be able to secrete and to change the culture to secrete our own talent.
Yeah. When you think about, a big part of when MLS engages with MLS Next is really impacting that pro development pathway. What is that pathway now? How is that changing? And what are the opportunities that are being created for athletes and their families?
What we are going to be focused on over the next few months is how to make this game more accessible, and how MLS is going to be able to recruit, scout player, identify player, not only in MLS market, but everywhere in the country, to be able to give a chance to the kids which don't have an MLS club or don't have a club, a pro club in their close to them, to be able to be a part of this, to give them a chance to be a part of being in a good platform, in the top platform. So accessibility, you all know that MLS club are free, but we also would like to work to make more accessible. And I know all our other clubs from our Next community are doing a lot of effort to decrease the cost and to have more scholarship available in their clubs, whatever the player come from in terms of family income. I think it's something we have to be focused on.
Yeah, and when MLS Next and more broadly that player development pathway, not everyone's going to make it to MLS, or for that matter, even in playing professionally in Europe. So how is the league, when MLS gets involved in MLS Next, how are you preparing players who don't have that opportunity? Is going to and entering college an alternative? Like what are the different outcomes if it's not being a professional player?
Good question, because once again, I'm going to give you my experience when I was academy director in France. At the end of the year, 80% of the generation of one generation, I was obliged to say them, for you, you are not going to sign a pro contract. So 80% or 85%, it's a big amount of people, too much. And unfortunately, sometimes our kids in Europe give up to go to school. Here in the US or in Canada, if you are a good player, if you play in a Next club and not only MLS, you cannot fail, because if you don't sign pro, you are going to have access to a scholarship for a good college program. So if this is a guarantee for parents, for players to say, I'm not going to think if I need to put my energy to become professional or not. I think there is no risk here. We have a great opportunity, and my colleagues in Europe are jealous, because never at the end of the year there is a few players which are in trouble to not having a plan B, which is sometimes can compete against the plan A. Plan A to become pro. The plan B is amazing, is to get access to a great college program in Division 1 or Division 2. So I don't see any problem in the US to play soccer.
Yeah, and one thing I'll say is, even if you don't get to that elite level, the plan C is you've gone and gotten these great lessons from sport that impacts your career. If you play sports, for example, your lifetime your annual earnings are at 8 or 9% higher in your life. You're better prepared for jobs in the future, better outcomes in terms of health and wellness. So there's all kinds of benefits in that plan C, where you don't become a professional player, or you don't necessarily even go and good enough to play in college as well, which leads to the final question, which is, how is MLS Next involvement going to impact the grassroots organizations out there, many of whom are represented here at the summit, right? One is that they could be part of MLS Next, but how is MLS Next effort, how can that impact soccer as a whole? What's the impact you can have?
It's a good question because we are not brand new in this world of youth soccer, but we took over Next. It was 1 year ago, and we are dealing with the pandemic. And I can tell you what I think, where I think MLS and MLS Next should influence in terms of standards, technical standards, in terms of coaching education in their community. MLS club or Next club should be able to improve the grassroots of the level of the volunteers and coaches in terms of how to share with them best practices. We talk about technical standards and benchmark, but we are going also to talk about we are not hermetic with our way of thinking, and MLS Next is also a part of the society, and how MLS Next is going to be able to be an actor of the world of tomorrow in terms of values, in terms of things we have to solve, and we have also responsibility to take care of, and diversity, inclusivity, fighting against racism and discrimination are also a part of our plan, because it's difficult to say, oh, we are only to talk about soccer. And I think, technically speaking, MLS could be a leader, even if we have to keep improving, and we know that with a lot of humility we are going to be focused on coaching education, sharing with players and parents and coaches the best practices. But we have also to try to be better in conveying the values of what we think what MLS and MLS Next. And when you play sport and when you play soccer, you believe in this value of diversity and inclusivity. That's a no-brainer, because otherwise it's difficult to play soccer nowadays.
Yeah, and it seems like that as MLS and MLS Next has success, that's inextricably linked to the success of what's going to happen in grassroots soccer. When you have a great professional league, you have role models, you have aspirations, you have standards that influence how people feel about soccer in this country and the kind of participation they want to have. Not to mention that vision and ambition for inclusivity. So you're saying, hey, this is important. We want everyone to be part of this sport, regardless of whether you become a professional athlete or you run a technology company or you work at a league office. There's lots of different pathways connected to how that's going to happen. So the future of soccer in this country is inextricably linked to the future of MLS, and certainly with MLS Next, it seems like the future is bright. So thank you. Go ahead.
And Jeremy, just to finish, I don't want to take too much of your time, but you're right. It's pretty easy to fix and to improve the pro elite pathway or the competitive pathway. It's way more difficult and very important to improve the grassroots, the level of the coaching in grassroots, the level of practice, because this is what we're talking about: how to impact millions of players and to play in a better way and to behave in a better way. So, future is bright, but we still have a lot of work to do.
Amazing. Well, thank you very much for all the work that you're doing and your leadership, and certainly being part of this event. And I know we're gonna get practical here as we bring on our next guest. So thank you, Fred. And with that, I'm gonna welcome in our next guest, Kelvin Jones and Ali Curtis. So thank you for joining us. And
thank you, guys.
I will say, as they turn on their cameras, I think I committed an own goal by cutting off the video halfway through with my own audio issues. So we're gonna post that video in the link because we want to make sure we can use all the great time with Kelvin and Ali. So thank you all for joining us. A warm welcome to you, Kelvin. You're no stranger to grassroots soccer. I know you're the academy director at MLS Next Club Columbus Crew, but you've coached the club's U12s, 15s, 17s prior to taking on the academy director role last fall. And then prior to the Crew, you were the director of coaching for Virginia Legacy Soccer Club. You played at Wake Forest and for Charleston Battery and the Richmond Kickers when you were 2-year USL champions. So thank you for being here. And Ali, thank you for being here. You're in your third season as the GM at Toronto FC. You've already made an impact helping to lead the team to the 2019 MLS Eastern Conference Championship title, an appearance in the Cup. And prior to that, sporting director at the Red Bulls and at the league office, and your own illustrious career winning the Herman Trophy as the top male collegiate player. And then and also had a lot of success in your time at Duke, which rivals, I think, our LeagueApps investor Shane Battier for the kind of impact you may have had. So thank you all for both joining us. And maybe we'll start with the question of understanding your unique experiences and connections to MLS, right? What you're bringing to this conversation. So I'll throw it to you first, Ali. When you think about this conversation about grassroots soccer and your own experience in context of MLS, what perspective are you bringing to this conversation?
First, I just want to say thanks for having me. Hope everyone is well. I think this is a really, really special group because I think if when you think about the last 12 months and you think about how the world is going to move in the direction of success, you really you really draw it up, and that it really takes the collective, and it takes everyone working together in unison in terms of sharing best practices, sharing ideas, sharing facilities, and all these types of things in order for the collective to succeed. And soccer is no different. It's important that we all work together and collaboratively. As Fred said earlier, it's not just looking at the national team or looking at Major League Soccer. It really is looking at the entire ecosystem that we all are a part of. And that's super important. In terms of me, I manage a team in Canada as part of MLS, but I grew up, I grew up in Michigan, and I played for, my local team, and then that local team went to kind of a more competitive club team, and so on and so forth. And so I try to take my own experiences and then also the experiences that I've had throughout my entire career and surround myself with as many people as possible that have different perspectives, different ideas. And I think that's super important. And it goes on this notion of diversity as well. And it's not just diversity of gender or race, but diversity of thought. And so, I think that this group is incredible. It'll be very, very important that this group is engaged and locked in, can achieve success as we move forward.
Appreciate all those sentiments, and I know we're going to dive deeper, especially when we think about what soccer can offer people. When you think about the how it's impacted your career and so many. Kelvin, you have so many different perspectives when it comes to kind of grassroots soccer and also the connection to MLS. Talk a little bit about the perspective you're bringing to this conversation about where soccer is going and where MLS is concerned.
Yeah, I think much like Ali stated as well, and I would imagine a lot of the players, the staff that are on this call right now, for me, it's about taking past experiences, whether good or bad, and trying to instill that into the kids that we're trying to teach and trying to educate. Coming much like Ali through local grassroots and working my way up through the local system, through college, and then lower level professional ranks. There are many experiences that we've experienced along the way. And then also the coaching pathway of also coaching in the local grassroots and being fortunate enough to come here and work my way up through the academy. So a unique perspective of playing and coaching and being at the grassroots level. And then also given the opportunity for the grassroots coaches in this community to be able to aspire to be hopefully where we are one day.
Ali, one question, I think, Fred was talking about a vision that he had for soccer in North America, an optimistic view. When you think about now presiding over a club, but someone who's come up through the grassroots system as well, what is your vision for the future of youth soccer? What's the opportunity that you see and how you're approaching that now from a club perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's when you're at the league office, and I worked at the league office, you really have to hone in on the collective, but when you're at a club, you have to really, we're part of a community, and we have a responsibility to that community. And it's not just only about TFC. It's about TFC, but then all the different people and I thought it was a really special point that Fred mentioned when he said, hey, when the team won the World Cup, when France won the World Cup, that was a success for every coach, every educator. And it's no different. What I would say is we measure ourselves in a lot of different ways at Toronto FC. One of them, of course, is trophies. And that's what we build for in terms of trying to win these things. But then also, everything else kind of leads into that. How are we fulfilling our promise to our community? How are we sharing our information? How are we reflective of the community that we reside in from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective. How are we contributing everything that we are and everything that we invest in? How are we sharing that with everyone around us, such that it's not just TFC that sits at the table eating and drinking, but it's everyone within our ecosystem, within our environment. And so, you know, we measure ourselves by a lot of different metrics. The most obvious one is, you know, when you go on social media and everybody wants us to sign a big player or to go in Columbus, they won a championship last year, you know, all those types of things. Those are the easy things. The challenging ones are the things that you do that don't show up right away, and they show up 15 years from now or 20 years from now. And you hope that you've locked in, you put the work in, so that, you know, 20 years from now, we can look back and be proud of what we've done and who we've become. And so that involves grassroots. It involves every layer and area of soccer. And, you know, like you said, I think Jeremy, you mentioned it before in terms of all the other ancillary benefits that you get from teaching, and we look at it no different. You know, I think when I think about my club and my young players and how we invest, you know, we want to give them everything that we can. Of course, it's you know, it's also a business for us, and so we want to develop these guys into pros, and then we go from there. But then also there's these aspects of giving these kids some happiness and great memories that they can forever look back on, which is awesome. There's this aspect of just being able to teach them the beautiful game that we all love, which is massive. And then there's this other aspect of really being able to work with our young players to help them navigate through adolescence in a difficult time in life, and to really try to give them the tools to develop into really, really good human beings. And that's important to us as well.
You know, it's fascinating to think about the unique position I think soccer and MLS is in this country, because that direct link for player development is unique. You know, maybe there's obviously some aspects on the NBA side with the G League, but effectively that link is very direct. And so as the club has more success, and especially if there's players come through that system, then you're just reinvesting back in that system. You're reinvesting back in that community. So that flywheel dynamic really creates a really powerful bond, not to mention the fan development and the broader community impact through those efforts, as you were saying. You know, Kelvin, you know, I think you bring a really interesting perspective when I think about the folks that are listening live and will watch this. You have a lot of grassroots soccer leaders from around the country, and you bring this empathy for them and the shoes they're sitting, and also the perspective of where MLS comes in. And what's shifting when you think about what's happening in the youth soccer landscape as MLS Next has emerged, and you think about your role? What's changing about youth soccer, and what kind of impact is that having, or can that have, on the grassroots organizations?
Yeah, I think of what the MLS Next vision is, and what Fred said in terms of a pathway. There's a player pathway, and then there's also the coaching development pathway. And I think a big change in what is happening in this country is the development of coaches. And we have MLS Next clubs that obviously have very educated staff. But what is our role as MLS Next clubs is, much like Ali said, is in our spaces, in our environments, how are we then disseminating the information and the knowledge that we have to help grow the game? Here in Columbus, it is a mission of ours to help grow the game, not only just for the players, but for the staff. And by default, if we're helping to grow staff members, then we're also then growing the game. So what is our role as an MLS club is to help disseminate the knowledge that we have within our space and within the game, and disseminate it down to the local clubs. It is a personal mission of mine to give access not only to players, but to coaches. I was given an opportunity that I may not have been qualified to on paper to have, but it was the ability of somebody to believe in what I do and the product that I have as a coach and as an educator, to take a leap of faith. So for us, it's also knowing it's not necessarily those that are qualified just on what they have on a piece of paper. It's getting out to know the community. It's getting out to bring the community into us to see what we are doing, to help spread our knowledge and to give access not only to the players but the coaching staffs as well.
Yeah, and it's as you speak and you bring that perspective, it's this idea that MLS Next organizations are not just about their own role in player development, but how they are amplifying it, whether they're a club, a formal MLS club or not. That broader message, that broader concept of what this needs to be. I think a lot about youth sports as in this transitional moment from a hobby to a profession, right? The professionalization of youth sports, it needs to be about kids, right? Kids need to be kids and have fun. And as they have potential to develop, there's those pathways, but the people involved in it need to be professional, whether they're a volunteer coach, whether they're a full-time coach, the standards, the professionalism, the approach, it's just too important on and off the field for it not to be. And I think what your points resonated. Kelvin, when you think about, you alluded to the opportunity that you had, and when you think about organizations that are out there that are saying, okay, how do I approach this question of access and equity and get more people involved, which is one of those kind of guiding principles of MLS Next. What advice or perspective do you have for grassroots organizations that, as it relates to how you've been having success as your organization and your own personal experience for what they can do to make sure that they're getting the most kind of access to their programs?
Yeah, great question. And I guess there's two perspectives that I have from being a director of a grassroots club, and then now also then being a director of an MLS Next club that has the access and the resources. From that perspective, first, it's much like Ali said, it's getting out into the community, making sure that we have eyes, whether it's through our scouting networks or whether it's through our player combines and the availability to access and give access to players. On that as well, it's also letting these coaches know that we're not the big bad club across the street that is here to take your players. It's understanding that these grassroots clubs are part of the ecosystem. And much like Ali said, what resonated from Fred is it was a celebration for the education system when they won. So it should be an education for all of soccer and what we've done as an organization to help move that thing forward. So it's letting these grassroots clubs know that we're not here to make things worse for you. We need to provide resources that can help you, that can ultimately help your kids. From the grassroots side, it's don't be afraid to ask. I think a lot, I remember when I was back in Virginia Legacy, it was you're afraid to kind of ask these clubs for help because they seem to be put on such a high pedestal. So you don't have the access or the potential access to even ask for these questions. So don't hesitate to ask. I can't tell you how many clubs within our area, even outside our area, are sending random text messages or random emails and asking how we can help to participate. And in any way that we can, given the resources that we have, we are willing and wanting to help anybody, granted that we have the resources to do it. So don't hesitate to ask. And then on the academy director sides of MLS Next clubs, it's getting out on the grassroots and giving access to players and to staff and showing them that we're here to help them, not to take away from what they're doing.
Yeah, one important point I think as you talk about this is, I think especially when it comes to questions of how do you think about promoting access and equity in your programs, when you're someone like myself who's a white male that's had lots of advantages and had the benefit of sports as well, there's a specific responsibility that I think that I have, that those who've had benefits of power and privilege or access to the sport has to try to think about that for others. And in a lot of cases, you just don't know what to do or how to do it. So that's a really good place to start by asking, right? To accept that you don't have all the answers, but you can ask and understand what the resources and what other people have done. And that starts that process going. So that invitation, I think, is true broadly, but I think especially on questions of access and equity as well. Ali, the MLS principles, and you really spoke to this, is not just about the player development side, which is obviously what people think about when they think about the approach that Toronto FC might have, but it's also about what happens off the field. And when you think about this, about the way that soccer can and it can be a vehicle to help for that broader kind of holistic vision of the development of the person, not just the development of the athlete. What advice do you have for all the organizations and leaders that are out there that are listening to think about that holistic approach, not just about what happens on the field?
Yeah, I mean, it's not easy. And I think that like everyone's jobs have been changing, not just over the last 12 months, but also over the last, 15, 20, 30, 40 years. And we all have to be about something that's more than just what's in our job description. And so, as coaches, they're not just teaching the game of soccer. They're doing so much more than that. Sometimes they are driving someone to and from training. Sometimes they're providing a meal or a water or some advice or as a guidance counselor. And so at the end of the day, our approach is you're dealing with human beings. And, the goal is that, 20, like I mentioned before, 20 years from now, you can look back and be really, really proud of what you've been able to accomplish, what you've been able to build and how you've done it. And at least for us as an MLS club, as a part of MLS Next, we just view our responsibility is to the community and improving that community. And as part of that commitment to improving, it's the notion of knowing that it's not just about kicking the ball in the net, or running really fast or being so skillful. It's also about, empathy. It's about character. It's about, knowing, treating people the right way. It's about being inclusive. And I think also what I would say is a lot of what has come out of the universe, really, I think probably since May 25th of last year, was this notion of diversity, equity, inclusion. But I also, the offshoots of that, I would say, was this notion of being deliberate and being intentional, and in everything that we do, from an off the field, from an on the field perspective, from an on the field perspective, being open and honest about who we are and what we stand for is super important. We talk about coaches and all these types of things. I grew up playing the game and everything else, and I never had one head coach that was black, or and so we had all these different aspects of being diverse, of being deliberate, being intentional, so that the outcome is great, and it works, and it makes sense, and we are the best versions of ourselves. And all these things, they start at the grassroots level, and then they build. And whether or not they build up or they build to the side, or however you want to frame it, it's all super, super important. And I'm where I am not because, part of it has to do with just probably playing ability, but then a lot of it had to do with everything I learned through that process. I respect and remember my coaches ever since I was a kid, all the way growing up. And those are the real kind of, like, I would say, the principles that I think allow you to be successful, not just for me as a GM, but hopefully as a dad, as a husband, as a friend, as a brother. Super important.
It's such a powerful point, because one is, it reminds all of us of the opportunity that we have, right, to kind of have an impact, to really shape the future of society, future leaders. That's an immense power. And, I think if we think about what we experienced during COVID and soccer in particular, it was like the world's greatest brand exercise. What can you get out of soccer if you can't play the sport, right? And what you get is community, right? You get team, right? You get the things that you learn from sport and that connectivity. And then as we hopefully everyone is able to fully return to the fields and all the grassroots, you're now able to say, okay, we can't forget that lesson. And with that opportunity then comes a responsibility, which is if youth sports, youth soccer can have such a profound impact on lives, whether they become a professional player, a general manager, an academy director, or a technology executive, if it can have that kind of impact, then that's something we should all feel really proud of, but we should take seriously and lean in. Clearly, what MLS and MLS Next is doing is an investment in that, and lots of good things to come. So I want to thank you all for both joining me and being part of this. And being part of this discussion, and certainly all the great work that MLS and MLS Next is doing. I also will point out, given the championships and successes of your organizations, there's a correlation between thinking this way and also on the field success, which is a lesson I think we also all take, right? That impact and success go hand in hand. They self-reinforce each other. So thank you all for being there and sharing your vision. And for everybody else, we're going to go to a quick break, which basically means you'll be able to hang out in your tables to meet your fellow attendees. You can jump to different tables if you want. At 1 o'clock, we're going to jump into this discussion on how to be a team captain on and off the field. And there'll also be some opportunity to win some prizes in a trivia competition hosted by soccer.com. So get ready and be able to do that. So 1 o'clock, we're going to get started. We've got about 9 minutes to hang out in your tables. And thanks again for all the great speakers to kick this off. See you in a bit.